Carl Jung believed most people live their entire lives inside a single room and never once suspect the house has other floors. They know the walls, they know exactly where the light switch is, and precisely how many steps it takes to reach the door. Because they can navigate that room in total darkness, they assume they understand the whole building. Then something happens. A loss, a crisis, or sometimes just a quiet, ordinary morning that feels strangely different for no reason you can name. And a door appears in a wall that was always blank. That door is what Jung spent his life studying. He called what lies beyond it the expansion of consciousness. And what he found is that once it opens, specific and unmistakable things start happening to a person. Things that simply never happened to anyone still asleep in that first room. Jung wasn't talking about intelligence or education or reading more books. A person can be brilliant and still spend 80 years in the same locked room, decorating it, rearranging the furniture, mistaking a bigger vocabulary for a bigger world. What he meant by consciousness was something else entirely, an actual widening of what you're able to perceive, in yourself and in reality. And he observed, across decades of working with people in the middle of profound transformation, that this widening announces itself through a very particular set of experiences. Here's the strange part. Most people going through it have no idea what's happening. They think something has gone wrong. They feel destabilized, isolated, like they're malfunctioning in some way they can't explain to their doctor or their family. What they're actually experiencing are the symptoms of a mind outgrowing its own walls. So today I want to walk you through what Jung identified, the things that only begin to happen when your consciousness expands. The moment your own patterns become visible to you while they're happening. The way reality starts responding to you through coincidences too precise to dismiss. The way certain people stop fitting in your life. The strange new ability to hold two opposite truths at once. And the particular loneliness that comes with seeing what those around you cannot yet see. If you've been feeling any of these, you're not coming apart. You may be opening up. The first thing that happens is the strangest, and almost nobody names it correctly. You start catching yourself in the act of being yourself. Before consciousness expands, you are your reactions. Someone criticizes you and you're instantly defensive. There's no gap, no space, no distance between the trigger and the response. You become the anger. You become the fear. You become the need to be right, and you'd swear on your life that this reaction is you, because there's no vantage point from which to see it as anything else. Jung understood the ego this way, as the center you look out from, the I that runs the show, and never questions whether it's the whole story. Then the door opens, and something quietly extraordinary begins. You're mid-argument, heart pounding, already forming the perfect cutting reply, and some calm, unbothered part of you is standing slightly off to the side, watching you get triggered, noticing the exact childhood pattern activating in real time. And here's what unsettles people. That watching part isn't panicking. It's just observing, with something close to curiosity, as if it has all the time in the world. Jung called this the relativizing of the ego. The ego stops being the whole of who you are and becomes one voice among others. An important voice, a necessary one, but no longer the only occupant of the house. You realize the I that's furious isn't the same as the awareness noticing the fury. And once you've felt that split, you can never fully unfeel it. You can still get angry, you can still be petty and reactive and human, but there's now a witness present, and the witness changes everything, because a pattern you can see is a pattern that has already begun to loosen its grip. Think about what this does to a person's ordinary day. You're about to send the text you'll regret, and you feel your own hand moving toward the send button, while another part of you observes the whole compulsion with quiet clarity. You catch the exact moment you start performing a version of yourself for someone whose approval you're chasing. You hear the story you tell about your own life, and for the first time, you notice it's a story. One interpretation among several possible ones, not the flat, unquestionable truth you'd always taken it for. This is the beginning of freedom, though it rarely feels like it at first. It often feels like self-consciousness cranked up to an uncomfortable degree, like you've lost the ability to simply be without watching yourself be. That discomfort is real, and it passes. What's forming is the muscle Jung considered the foundation of all genuine transformation, the capacity to observe your own psyche instead of being helplessly run by it. As he put it, until you make the unconscious conscious, it directs your life and you call it fate. This is the exact moment fate starts turning back into choice. The second thing that happens is the one that makes people question their sanity, because it seems to violate everything they believed about how reality works. The world begins to feel responsive. Coincidences pile up in ways that stop feeling like coincidence. You think of an old friend you haven't spoken to in years, and within the hour, they message you out of nowhere. You're wrestling with a specific question, something private you haven't told anyone, and a stranger in a coffee shop says the exact phrase that answers it. You keep encountering the same image, the same number, the same idea from 4 unrelated directions in a single week, until the repetition starts to feel less like chance and more like emphasis. Jung took this seriously enough to give it a name, synchronicity, which he defined as an acausal connecting principle, meaning events that are linked not by cause and effect, but by meaning. He was a rigorous, scientifically minded man, and he resisted this idea for a long time precisely because it sounded mystical. But he kept observing it in his patients and in his own life, always at the same moment, during periods of intense psychological growth. When a person's consciousness was expanding, the coincidences intensified. When they were stagnant, the coincidences went quiet. Here's the part Jung was careful about, and the part the internet usually mangles. Synchronicity isn't the universe granting your wishes. You can't force it, and the moment you try to use it to feed your ego, to prove you're special, chosen, ahead of everyone else, it seems to dry up entirely. What he described was subtler. As consciousness widens, you simply notice more of the connections that were always there. It's like the difference between hearing a song 100 times and suddenly, on the 101st, catching the bass line that was underneath the whole time. The bass line didn't appear, your ear finally opened to it. And there's a reason this feels destabilizing. You've spent your whole life inside a story where you're a separate object bumping around among other separate objects, in a universe of pure cause and effect. Synchronicity cracks that story. You start to sense that you are woven into something, that the sharp line between inside me and out there in the world is thinner and more porous than you assumed. Jung believed this reflected a genuine layer of reality, what he called the deep interconnection underlying the psyche and the world. Try explaining that to someone still in the first room. They'll tell you you're seeing patterns that aren't there, that you're one step from tinfoil hats, that the human brain is a meaning-making machine that hallucinates significance in randomness. And you can't prove them wrong because synchronicity refuses to perform on command. It won't show up when you want to demonstrate it. It arrives privately, quietly, as a kind of dialogue between you and a reality that has started, unmistakably, to feel alive. The third thing that happens is the one that hurts, and the one people are least prepared for. The people around you begin to change, or rather, your relationships with them do, and some of them fall away entirely. You'll be sitting with friends you've known for a decade, in a conversation you've had 100 times, and something will feel off, not because they've changed, because you have. The gossip that used to absorb you now feels thin. The complaints that used to bond you now feel like a cage everyone's agreed to stay inside. You find yourself going quiet, not out of judgment, but because you no longer have anything to add to a frequency you've stopped living on. Jung had a concept that explains a surprising amount of this: projection. He observed that we constantly, unconsciously, project the disowned parts of ourselves onto other people. Our unlived potential, our buried anger, our hidden shame. Much of what passes for connection between people is actually a stable exchange of projections. I carry your denied strength, you carry my denied softness, and we call the arrangement a friendship. It works, as long as neither of us grows. When your consciousness expands, you start pulling those projections back. You begin to see people more clearly as they actually are, rather than as the roles you'd assign them in your inner drama. And the relationships that were built entirely on the old exchange have nothing left to stand on. Jung wrote that everything which irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And once you start following that thread, you can't keep blaming the people who were only ever holding up a mirror. The mirror stops being useful the day you decide to look directly. There's a cost to this that no one warns you about. Some people in your life were connected to a version of you that no longer exists, a version who needed rescuing, or who could be counted on to stay small, or who reliably played the role that kept the whole system comfortable. When you stop playing it, the system destabilizes. People push back. They tell you you've changed, and they don't mean it as a compliment. They might accuse you of thinking you're better than them. What they're actually feeling is the loss of a fixed point they'd organized part of their life around. And you'll grieve some of these losses, genuinely, because love was often real inside them even when the structure was outgrown. But here's what Jung understood that makes the loss bearable. The relationships that survive your expansion are transformed by it. They become deeper, more honest, less dependent on performance. And the new connections that form, the ones built on who you actually are now, carry a quality of realness the old ones never could. You're not becoming isolated. You're clearing space for connection that doesn't require you to shrink. If any of this is landing a little too accurately, if you've been catching yourself in your own patterns, sensing the world respond in ways you can't explain, feeling old relationships thin out beneath you, then you already know this isn't a process you can think your way through with the mind alone. It asks for a different kind of attention. That's exactly why we put together True Self-Discovery, 24 reflection exercises drawn from Jung's own approach, built to help you sit with these shifts instead of being overwhelmed by them, to give you a way of listening to what's actually opening up. If you're standing in front of that door and don't quite know how to walk through it, the link is right below. Now let's keep going, because the next thing that happens is the one Jung considered the true mark of an expanded mind. The fourth thing that happens is that you gain the ability to hold two opposite truths at the same time without your head coming apart. The unexpanded mind runs on either or. Something is good or bad. A person is friend or enemy, hero or villain. You're a success or a failure. This binary machinery is efficient. It lets you make fast decisions and take firm sides. And it's also the root of an enormous amount of human suffering, because reality almost never actually splits that cleanly. Jung called the capacity to bridge these opposites the transcendent function. He didn't mean transcendence in the floaty spiritual sense. He meant a specific psychological ability that emerges as consciousness matures. The power to sit inside a genuine contradiction long enough for something new to be born from the tension, rather than collapsing prematurely into one side or the other. Watch what this looks like in an actual life. You can love someone deeply and recognize in the same breath that they've harmed you, without either truth canceling the other. You can see that a painful chapter was both the worst thing that happened to you and the thing that made you who you are, and hold both as fully true. You can look at a person you disagree with completely and still see the fragment of legitimate wisdom buried inside their position. You stop needing every situation to resolve into a clean verdict. This is why people whose consciousness has expanded often seem, from the outside, frustratingly hard to pin down. Ask them whose side they're on, and they'll describe the whole situation instead of picking a team. This isn't fence-sitting or cowardice. It's that they can see the truth and the shadow in every position, and they've lost the ability to pretend otherwise just to belong to a tribe. There's a beautiful and difficult consequence to this. You become, in Jung's terms, almost impossible to recruit. Every movement, every cause, every ideology needs true believers. People who'll swallow the whole package, defend it against all evidence, and treat the opposing side as pure enemy. But you can no longer flatten a complicated world into a simple story with heroes and monsters. You see the shadow in your own side and the humanity in the other, and that makes you useless to anyone selling certainty. It can be lonely, this refusal of the simple story. In a world that runs on outrage and clean divisions, the person holding paradox looks wishy-washy, or arrogant, or naive. But Jung considered this capacity one of the highest achievements of the psyche, because wholeness, real psychological wholeness, isn't the triumph of your good side over your bad side. It's the integration of both into something larger that includes and transcends the war between them. The fifth thing that happens is that your inner life at night comes alive in a way it never was before. Your dreams change. Before consciousness expands, most people's dreams are forgettable static, stress leaking out, the day's leftovers getting shuffled and dumped. You wake, you forget, you get on with things. But as the unconscious and the conscious mind start opening a channel between them, something shifts. The dreams get vivid. They get insistent. They carry a charge of meaning that lingers into the morning and won't let you shake it. Jung treated dreams as one of the most direct communications from the deeper psyche, messages in symbolic language, from the parts of you the daylight mind has ignored or refused. He believed the unconscious is constantly trying to restore balance, to show you what you're not looking at. And when consciousness expands, you finally develop the capacity to receive the transmission instead of sleeping straight through it. You'll start having what he called big dreams, dreams that don't feel like ordinary dreams at all, dreams that seem to arrive from somewhere far below your personal history, populated by figures who feel more like living presences than random images. You wake changed, as if you've been somewhere and undergone something, as if a decision got made in a room you don't have conscious access to. These aren't the mind idly recycling the day. These are, in Jung's understanding, the self speaking, the deeper center of the whole psyche, using the only language it has. Here's the practical thing that happens. You start noticing that your dreams answer your questions. You go to sleep wrestling with something and wake with the knot loosened, not because you solved it logically, but because some other intelligence worked on it in the dark. Recurring dreams that plagued you for years sometimes resolve once you finally understand what they were pointing at. You begin to sense that a huge portion of who you are was operating below the waterline the whole time, and it's now, at last, willing to talk. This is what Jung meant by one of his most quoted lines: "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." It sounds like a paradox, and it is one, but it lands exactly right here. The person forever chasing meaning out in the external world, the next achievement, the next relationship, the next distraction, is the one who's truly asleep, dreaming a life. The person who turns to face their own depths, including the strange nightly theater of the unconscious, is the one waking up. The dreams get loud precisely because you finally started listening. The sixth thing that happens is the hardest to sit with, and it's the reason many people quietly turn around and try to go back through the door. A specific, unfamiliar loneliness sets in. It isn't the loneliness of having no one around. You can be surrounded by people who love you and feel it just as sharply. It's the loneliness of perception, of seeing things others in the room genuinely cannot see, and having no way to hand them the seeing. You watch two people locked in a conflict, and you can see the invisible pattern driving both of them, the childhood wound puppeteering the whole exchange, and you can't say a word because they're not asking, and they wouldn't hear it. You've walked into a wider room, and most of the people you love are still in the first one, and there's no phrase in any language that transfers a room from one mind to another. Jung was unusually honest about this. He wrote plainly that there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and this loneliness is a large part of that pain. Expansion doesn't just add abilities, it also removes your capacity to unsee, to re-enter the comfortable agreements you've outgrown, to pretend along with everyone else that the surface is all there is. You can't force the coincidences on a skeptic. You can't hand someone your dreams. You can't argue anyone into a paradox they're not ready to hold. What you've perceived is, in a real sense, incommunicable, and that gap between what you see and what you can share is where the ache lives. This is the stage where people panic and reach for the exit. They try to numb the perception. They throw themselves back into distraction, into busyness, into the old crowd and the old conversations, trying to convince themselves nothing has changed. And sometimes it works, for a while. They talk themselves back into the first room and pull the door shut. But Jung noticed that these people rarely find peace there. They carry a low, persistent ache. The ache of knowing there's more and having chosen not to look, of having glimpsed the rest of the house and gone back to pretending it's a studio apartment. What he wanted people to understand is that this loneliness is not a sign you've gone wrong. It's a sign you've gone far. It's the temporary condition of the pioneer, the one who reached a place before their companions and has to wait, sometimes years, for others to arrive. And they do arrive, because the more people expand, the more they eventually find one another, drawn together by a recognition that doesn't need explaining. The isolation of consciousness is real, but Jung believed it was a threshold, not a destination. The necessary solitude of someone becoming whole enough to finally connect without disguises. So what do we do with all of this? What is it actually for? The watching self, the responsive world, the relationships reshuffling, the paradox, the loud dreams, the ache. Jung's answer ran counter to nearly everything the modern world tells you to want. He didn't believe the point of expanding consciousness was to feel good, or to become calm, or to rise above the mess of being human into some serene, detached peace. He called that whole fantasy a kind of hiding. The point, as he saw it, was to become whole, to integrate everything you are, the light and the dark, the conscious and the buried, the ego and the vast unconscious beneath it, into a single, genuine human being. He named this lifelong process individuation, and he was clear that it never fully finishes. There's no graduation, there's always another floor of the house. And notice what all 6 of these experiences have in common. Every one of them enlarges you at the cost of your comfort. The observing self makes you responsible for what you used to blame on others. Synchronicity dissolves the tidy story of a separate self in a dead universe. Your relationships reorganize, and some of them break. Paradox strips you of the relief of certainty. Your dreams demand to be reckoned with, and perception isolates you. Expansion is not a reward the universe hands the deserving. It's a demand it makes of the willing. As Jung insisted, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. and there's nothing comfortable about that work. But here's what makes it worth every difficult mile. The first room was safe, and it was also small. Inside it, your joy was capped at exactly the height of your walls. Your love was filtered through performance. Your sense of being alive was thinned by all the parts of reality you'd agreed not to notice. When consciousness expands, yes, the lows get lower and the loneliness cuts deeper. But the aliveness becomes something the small room could never have contained. You get access to the whole house, every floor, every room you didn't know was yours. If you recognized yourself anywhere in this, if you've been standing in front of a door that appeared in a wall you thought was solid, understand that the disorientation you feel isn't a warning to turn back. It's the feeling of a mind adjusting to more space than it's used to. Your eyes are adapting to a brighter room, and it stings at first, the way light always does after the dark. That stinging is not damage, it's sight returning. You don't have to figure out the whole building tonight. Consciousness doesn't expand all at once, and it can't be rushed by force. All that's asked of you right now is that you don't slam the door, that you stay curious about the watching self, that you notice the coincidences without needing to prove them to anyone, that you let the relationships find their true shape, that you hold the contradictions a little longer than is comfortable and listen to what your dreams are trying to say, and bear the loneliness knowing it's the loneliness of someone arriving early. The rest unfolds on its own schedule, the way a house reveals itself room by room to someone finally willing to explore it. Jung spent his entire life pointing at that door and telling anyone who'd listen that what's on the other side is not madness and not a mistake. It's the larger life that was always waiting patiently, one wall away. And if you're standing at that threshold now, sensing the wider rooms, unsure how to take the first step into them without losing your footing, that's precisely the moment true self-discovery was made for. 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's work, built to walk beside you while your eyes adjust to the light, so the expansion becomes something you can meet with steadiness instead of fear. If tonight you felt even a little of what we've been talking about, follow the link below and let it be your way of stepping, gently, into the rest of the house.